Welcome to IndyScotNews Midweek with special guest Gordon Ross of IndyCar. Gordon, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
I can see you're parked up at your favorite place and have a good
Oh yes,
internet connection.
I do. Yeah, this is why I use this location for. This is actually most of the time where I broadcast from.
Okay. Gordon, could you tell us a little bit about IndyCar broadcasts? You've got a great following on Facebook. Could you tell us a little bit about the broadcasts? How did they start? And what was your initial purpose with the vlog?
Well, I can tell you it started at the beginning of 2015, and the reason they started then was just simply that was the time when Facebook started to feature the live streaming button on their dashboard, and I had never used it before. And at that point, I don't know about you, but this was just in the aftermath of the independence referendum in 2014, and I was feeling pretty fed up. And I thought, well, I'm going to have a go at this. I'm just going to have a rant for 20 minutes, and probably, maybe half a dozen of my friends online will see it. So I had a 20-minute rant, pretty much as I'm doing now, just talking to camera through the phone. And I went back to work, came back at the end of the day to see how many views I had, and discovered there were 16,000. I think at that point I realized what a powerful medium it could be. And I seem to have touched a nerve with so many people. I was flooded with requests to do more shows, and it started from there basically. Went to a weekly show, then more demands for more shows, and people started passing me information from all across the planet basically. And IndyCar just got bigger and bigger.
Okay. On that topic, how do you choose the issues that you want to talk about? Do you research specific topics, or are you more a stream of consciousness person from what's been going on in the news?
I think it's fair to say it's a bit of both because the original idea behind the IndyCar blog was to fill a gap because we don't have any television media. There's no independent Scottish television media that's reliable enough, which isn't biased in favour of the union. So I wanted to do something to counter that. That was the original motivation, was to be able to debunk a lot of the news stories that we were hearing, and also to give people information which was not being broadcast by the mainstream media. In other words, any good news about Scotland was deliberately being kept out of the news, and we were being bombarded with negativity, as you know, anyway, that goes on daily, especially through the BBC.
Mm.
So that was the first thing. I wanted to be able to provide people with good news stories, and also to correct a lot of the omissions and the misrepresentations of the mainstream press, so that I felt there was a need for it. In fact, a lot of other bloggers started doing the same things, maybe not necessarily on live streaming. So that was the motivation. The program evolved from there into a 20-minute format in which I would normally cover maybe three topics, maximum of three, for approximately 5 minutes each, finishing usually with a positive story and a roundup. But I have done a lot of programs, as you're probably aware, which are what you just described, which is a sort of stream of consciousness, my own thoughts on what's going on. And what
Yeah.
I like to do on those programs when I get the chance is I'll often have been thinking about something for a few days, and maybe the night before a broadcast, I will have put it all together into something that I can present. But as you're probably aware, I don't script any of these programs. These are literally unscripted but mentally rehearsed monologues, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing some kind of polemic, when I'm arguing in favor of something that I think should happen, or when I'm pointing out the kind of work that's going on in the country at the moment, which is never being reported on. For example, in some areas of renewable energy, tidal energy is one of my favorite subjects because I believe it's underreported, and it has a far larger potential than even wind energy does because it's far more powerful and it's constant. And because
Yeah.
of that, it's reliable, and we could base an entire energy economy on it. So I have enthusiasms for certain subjects, as
Yeah.
everybody knows, and I bang the drum for some of them. So you get uh, the stream of consciousness are usually connections between what's currently being developed, what's possible in the future, and why it's only possible to do it if we're not connected to the UK, which controls things like our energy policy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Gordon, you got me thinking recently due to a Facebook post you had up the other day. Can I just quote you back to
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah, I
You
know the
wrote,
one.
you wrote, I'm now reconsidering whether the faith I put in the current leadership of the SNP was badly misplaced. I feel like I've been deceived into working for 8 years, every day of the week, supporting the goal of getting a second referendum and winning it. And near the end of the piece, you finished off with, I've had enough. It's obvious to me now that there is no second referendum being organized. The evidence supports this conclusion. There are no funds for the campaign, no draft bill is before our parliament, no timeline, not even a date for the draft bill publication. Nothing is happening. What changed, Gordon, or what made you write that particular piece?
Well, those who've been watching the program for many years will know that every now and again, I get so frustrated that I have to vent it in some way. And that's really just an expression of my frustration at the lack of progress that there has been. And also the lack of evidence of any progress. The secrecy of the SNP has bothered me for 8 years, and I have consistently criticized the SNP on this one fundamental thing, which is this lack of communication between the parliamentary party, which is in government, also the party itself, which is supposedly planning for the independence referendum, and the broader independence community, which, let's face it, is 90% of the actual independence campaigning force. We are the majority here. The party, I see it, the SNP, is the enabler. Their job is to get us to that independence referendum and to create the legislation that allows it to happen. And at the point where I wrote that, I was so fed up, and it was just simply got to the point where April had arrived and nothing had been said about this concrete proposal that Nicola Sturgeon said that she was going to put to us in April. But of course, I forgot one thing, and I'm happy to hold my hands up, and that is the Easter recess. It's happening quite early this year, and of course, the SNP is probably not wanting to put this bill before Parliament before the recess because there wouldn't be time to debate it, and that is probably a mistake on my part, because that comment that I made, although it was heartfelt and genuine, and I don't regret making it, was badly timed, because we haven't seen the evidence yet of what is going to happen with this independence referendum bill. I have seen sight of the bill, and I know what's in it and what's not in it, and it's a very, very simple document. And it really just needs to be placed before the House. And all we're waiting for is for the First Minister to tell us when.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was back in January, we were told it was coming within weeks. A few months have gone. But to be fair, Gordon, over the years, you've regularly credited the SNP with having a plan, albeit secret. And you often suggest that they have gamed every strategy and counter strategy. But the fact is, we have been drifting since Nicola took over. I mean, it's 6 years on from the change in circumstances of 2016. In that context, do you support a Plan B plebiscite election in 2024 if nothing happens?
I always have thought that there ought to be a backup plan, because having spent so many years researching the legalities of the union and what you can and cannot do, the trouble with the Union and the Union Act and the treaties is that at the time when they were drawn up, the situation that we're in now couldn't even have been imagined. The idea that there would be a separate Scottish Parliament which was devolved, it would have entered nobody's minds at the time when the treaty was written 315 years ago. And the other thing is, the treaty that was written then is not what's being applied now. The treaty that was written then was about combining the crowns and having both parliaments sitting in the same building. And basically, that's what the treaty says. And that's really all it is. So to my mind, there are many ways in which independence could be gained quite legally by other means. As you say, a plebiscite election is not unheard of. What I was going to say actually was that the only thing which is certain about ending the Union is that in order to do it in a way which can be recognized internationally, it just has to be democratic. There needs to be a democratic event, and it's not specified what that is. It could quite easily be a general election where there's a single issue. And that single issue is we are going to declare independence if we are elected in a majority. And that's a very, very simple statement of fact. It's not even a mandate. It's just simply, well, that's what we're going to do. And this is what you will get if you vote for us.
Yeah, it's taken so long. Gordon, you're not a member of a political party, I understand, but you did flirt with ISP a few years ago when they arrived on the scene. Did you back then sense the need for an indie party with more urgency?
Well, that was my motivation. That was the motivation in getting involved with ISP. The other thing was that I was getting an awful lot of mail from fans of the show who said to me, "You really should run. You've got great ideas. You should have the chance to voice them in Parliament and actually get some of this stuff done." And I thought, well, okay, fair enough. I would like to get it done, and I can't make it happen from behind the wheel of a car. I need to be actually in the chamber. And when ISP formed, and I spoke to them at length because I was talking with ISP, I was also talking with what became ALBA as well later on. I've also kept contact with the Scottish Socialist Party, Solidarity, and various other smaller pro-independence parties because I'm always interested to hear what everybody thinks, not just the main parties. When ISP formed, to me, it sounded like there was a chance we might get some list candidates elected who were going to push the SNP harder to move faster. That was my motivation for getting involved with them. And of course, the history of that now is quite well known, that at the point where ISP was choosing candidates and I had gone through candidate selection and I had passed the vetting procedure, at that moment was the time when Alex Salmond announced that he was joining what became ALPA. And from then on, the ISP began to fragment. And I think the leadership of the ISP began to think that it would be very difficult to stand in the face of ALBA, which had obviously a much more popular leader in many ways for independence campaigners, and also had a similar message to ISP. I didn't agree necessarily with everything that ISP was in favour of, and I tried not to involve myself too much in the GRA, the Gender Recognition Act changes that were being opposed by the leader of ISP, and she has every right to do that. I don't say that she is wrong. However, I didn't hold this as a strong an opinion about it.
No.
But at the end of it, I thought, well, this is going to be a very difficult thing to do, to get elected in a party the size of ISP, which, although at the time was gaining a lot of members then, hundreds of members were joining at the time. But when Alex entered the fray, I think the rest of the smaller parties began to realize that their voter base was probably going to migrate to Salmond's party because he shared a lot of their views and had expressed this opinion that it should be happening a lot faster.
Yeah, right. So you would have stood as an ISP candidate at Hollywood 2021. Was
that was the plan? Yeah, that was the plan.
Very interesting. I hadn't realized that. Gordon, on that same subject, why do you think there's been such animosity towards the new pro-Indy parties, especially from the high Hegians and the SNP? I mean, ISP, it came in for quite a bit of criticism from the big Indy party when they started, and it's continued with ALBA. I mean, Nicola said, "I won't work with Alex. He's a gambler." She keeps mentioning the inappropriate behavior which he was found innocent of. Pete Wishart has a weekly, if not daily, rants about ALBA, and Stuart McDonald lives in a world of Russophobia, but he never seems to tire of mocking Alex Salmond, a man without whom Stuart McDonald would probably still be a holiday rep. What's behind the attacks? Because the more pro-Indy parties, surely the better.
Oh, I'd agree with that. Definitely, the more parties, the better. The more support there is, and the broader the support base becomes, the better. And also the more variety in the ideas about how to achieve independence, the better. Because the SNP is very much a monolith. It has its own view of things, and nothing else will shake that. And you can go to the SNP with a brilliant idea for something which has been thoroughly researched. You can have every expert in the world say that they should do it, and they won't, because unless it comes from one of their own experts, they're not really interested in it. And it's that kind of bunker mentality that hasn't helped. Where the animosity came from is very obvious. It came from the Alex Salmond court case, in which it appears that one member of the Scottish Civil Service leaked confidential information about Mr. Salmond's internal inquiry at Holyrood to the press. And then the press got hold of it and then blew it out of proportion. And of course, the police felt then they had to investigate so that Mr. Salmond couldn't be seen to be getting any favoritism. And you know what the pile-on was like after that.
Yeah,
Of course, Mr.
course.
Salmond was cleared of any criminality. Now, whether he behaved in a way which was offensive to some people or not, I can't tell you because I wasn't there. But from my point of view, as a fairly neutral person standing outside of the SNP at the time, this seemed very personal to me. It looked like whoever it was who leaked this information at the time to the press was deliberately trying to start a battle between Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. And of course, she pressed all the right buttons. Nicola went off on one and she got involved in this. And that split was driven by that leak of information. And I think we all know that the leak of information was a political act by somebody acting for the United Kingdom government. Nobody knows who, but somebody in the civil service. My money is still on Leslie Evans, although nobody could ever prove this, but that's who I suspected was behind this. The problem with it was I was disappointed that it became so personal. And it might be that there is some history between Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond, which none of us knows about. Yeah. Maybe there were some things that happened between them that caused a rift. I don't know. But either way, that division split the party in two. And many of the people who are now ALPA members are old friends of mine who said, we can't be doing with this anymore. This is not on. Nicola is taking too long. Alex wants to do it quicker. We trust him more. And so they split. The acrimony has been driven by a small number of regular Twitter users on both sides who just keep knocking lumps out of each other. And that's gone on for a long, long time. Yeah. The trouble with this is that I think that needs to be buried in the past now, and both parties need to get on with the business of getting independence, even if they don't get along. I mean, we're talking about people who have to be on the same side, even if they don't like one another. And there's a lot of that goes on in battles of this kind. We know this even from watching the situation in Ukraine. There are probably some undesirable people fighting in the Ukrainian army, but it's a necessity. In our case, there are divisions in the movement, you know.
Well, well, that's another kind of. We won't go to Ukraine today.
No.
Gordon, can I fire some quick fire questions off as we reach the end here?
Yep.
EU or EFTA? What's your choice post independence?
Well, my view has always been European Free Trade Association, simply because it's so much faster and it does not commit us to anything that we don't want to get involved in yet. It would allow us to trade freely. It would allow us to keep the harmonization of standards, our human rights and all the rest of it. And even if we decided later on that we wanted to join the European Union, it would at least provide us with the opportunity to begin trade immediately. And it is far, far faster. We know that, and I know that you have been speaking to the same people that I have in the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group, who have spoken to the European Free Trade Association members and their committee. And that committee has said that if Scotland has a democratic event and votes to become independent, then that's good enough for EFTA, and they would accept Scotland straight in. And if they're prepared to say that, then I think I would take that on face value. I've always been in favour of EFTA first, because I believe that to rejoin the European Union should also be the subject of a referendum with a lot more information, because the membership of a country to rejoin the EU is not going to be the same as it was with the UK. The UK had so many opt-outs because it just refused to do certain things, you know. Whereas Scotland rejoining, we don't know what the entry requirements would be yet, and I think that is something for another day. Frankly, I'd rather start trading with EFTA and think about that later.
Yeah. Well, I'm resident in a country that has actually EU opt-outs. You know, the Danes have a very strong sense of national independence, having been occupied in the Second World War and having a very large southern neighbour like Scotland, but they've managed to maintain their independence. And there's going to be a referendum here on the 1st of June on one of the opt-outs, where the government appears to be taking advantage of the situation in Europe at the moment. But very interesting, Gordon. In principle, have you anything against the EU, that we might become a vassal state of a larger organization, or is it just that EFTA's easier?
No, to me, the major drawback for the EU is just the size of the bureaucracy. I don't believe that we would be a vassal state. No. We would be one of 29 states, and we would have a proportionate amount of power within the European Parliament, which is something we just do not have in the UK at all. However, there are limitations when you join the EU, as we know. And I think Scotland would need to think very carefully before it rejoined, and also would need to make sure that it had negotiated its settlement before putting it to the people.
Scotland might need its own Edinburgh Agreement, like the Danes.
Well, I think we would need to know what the terms of the European Union membership were before we put it to the people in a referendum. Because let's face it, countries in Europe use referendums all the time when there are big changes. It's quite normal. And we seem to view referendums as something that can only happen once in a lifetime for some bizarre reason, according to Boris Johnson. You know,
they have many referendums, and they have a very clearly defined franchise. Small countries are very careful and protective of the franchise. Gordon, these are supposed to be quick fire questions. Sorry.
I know. Sorry.
No, it's my fault. Gordon, over the years, some well-known Indy activists have stood down due to the endless delay and inaction. What's kept you going?
I think what's kept me going is the fact that it's worth it, because the only thing that keeps me going is the thought that we will succeed. If I didn't think we could succeed, then I would give up. If I thought it was hopeless, I wouldn't be doing it. The fact that we're so close to it now, this isn't the time to give up. Despite my many frustrations and me occasionally venting that I've had enough, these are just symptoms of the way everybody feels at the moment. And I'm probably just saying what millions of Scots are thinking right now.
Very much so. Gordon, what's your reaction to those who accuse you of weather vane Indy politics, changing your views as the wind changes, the wind direction changes?
I don't care. My mind changes when situations change. So if situations change, I change my view. If you can't change your view, then basically you're entrenched and you're stuck, you know, and you become a Tory, because that's what the Tories are. They're stuck in the past and they won't change their views. Everybody should have a more agile mind and be prepared to change their minds. If things change, sometimes you need to change your view.
Is there anything you regret broadcasting to your viewers?
The only thing I can think of that I regret, and I don't regret it because of who I was interviewing, but I once interviewed Tommy Sheridan several years ago, and many people advised me not to do it. But I was interested to hear why Tommy wanted independence at a personal level. So I interviewed him in his house, in his home. Well, actually, I was parked outside his house. We did it in the car. And I had a great chat with Tommy, and it was a very interesting interview. But I knew it would polarize everybody who supports independence. And I got absolute pelters for that. And I was accused of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I am unapologetic. I will interview anybody who supports independence. I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
If they want what we want, then I'll talk to them. As far as I'm concerned, this is a country with a lot of different opinions, with lots of different political parties and viewpoints. And if we don't hear them and we object to it every time they speak, then those ideas are never heard.
No.
And frankly, if you're going to interview people, you cannot say, well, I'm never going to interview so-and-so because I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
That is just self-censorship.
Yeah, well, Tommy was a huge hero of the independence movement in 2014, and he still is, in my opinion, a huge positive in the indie movement. Gordon, there's an election coming up. Will you be ranking all pro-indie parties by preference?
Yes, of course. I'm not going to rank any others, and I don't recommend that anyone else does either. Only rank candidates whom you know are either ambivalent to independence or for it. But no union parties, no. They won't be on my list.
No. So no boycott. We should not be boycotting other pro-independence parties because we may not like their leader or whatever. But we can put them at preference. We can preference the.
Look at it this way. The future of the country is far, far more important than petty squabbles.
Yeah. Gordon, hand on heart, will the SNP deliver the Indy ref they've promised since the change of material circumstances in 2016?
I think they have to, because if they don't, then they're doomed. This is the last chance, and if they fail this time, then Nicola Sturgeon and the party are probably history, and something else will have to come along and replace it. Yeah. This is probably the last kick of the ball for the independence referendum, as far as I'm concerned. If this announcement is not made after the Easter recess, then a lot of people are going to be extremely angry, and rightly so, after all the promises. So really, now is the time.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, it will happen. Otherwise, Nicola Sturgeon will be a footnote in our history.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's not a huge amount of positivity when you talk to people about a referendum in 2023. It's been difficult enough to get a positive answer from the president of the SNP. Looking forward to 2024, if 2023 nothing happens, election 2024, will the SNP be re-elected?
I can't imagine how, because they would basically have just driven all their supporters away.
Yeah.
The foot dragging can only go on so long, and that phrase. I think Shakespeare once said in one of his plays, "There's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads to glory." Well, this is that time.
Yeah.
This is the tide in the affairs of Scotland, which has reached its maximum flood point now. If we don't ride this wave to independence, there's not going to be a better time.
Exactly. And on that positive note, Gordon, I'll say thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great fun.
Okay. All the best. Bye now.
Bye-bye now.